Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and chat to amazing humans about their journeys through life. For this episode, I'm so happy to introduce Charlotte Storey to the conversation. Welcome, Charlotte.
Thank you.
Lovely to have you. As I always do, just a very brief introduction from me, albeit you'll do your proper introduction in a second. How we got to this recording. Now, interestingly, I have an amazing team who work with me at Simpler, and one of my colleagues had a conversation with Charlotte and then came to me straight away and said, Matt, you need to talk to this person. They're amazing. They've got lots of things going on in their world, and I think they'll make a great guest for your podcast. So here we are. That was a message that I was receiving from my colleague just last week. So within less than a week, we were recording together. So Charlotte, welcome to the podcast. I don't know a huge amount about you, which is lovely because I'm going to sit here and I'm just going to enjoy listening to what's going on or what you've been through and your experiences. But do a very brief introduction and then I'll ask you the big question.
Okay, I'm Charlotte Storey. I currently run an online company called Leader Empowerment, but that's very much not the career I started out with. I started out as a professional actor and musician. I was a West End performer for about 15 years. And that was career number one. And then I moved into teaching. And through the teaching, I've really learned to handle my own mental stability, I suppose I would describe it as. So I've become much less of a reactive person than I was back in the day. And I talked to you, Matt, just before we came online about the fact that at this moment, my mum's dying of leukemia and she's critically ill in hospital. And most people think, that's crazy. How are you not falling to pieces? Well, I've had those episodes of falling to pieces. And I've called upon all of the things that I've learned, really, the resilience factors that I've learned to be able to cope with that reality now.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you. And I think you've alluded to a couple of the things that we're going to be covering in this conversation as well. But it's lovely to have you, Charlotte. Thank you for joining. So the big question I ask every guest is simple, although you're going to fill it with all of your experience, but your journey with mental health, your life, and just sort of define it and describe it as you wish to. So over to you.
Well, I was born in Coventry a long time ago now, actually, into a fairly deprived community, I suppose, where people were quite brutal. I saw a lot of domestic violence in my childhood, not in my own home, but certainly around me. And I was friends with the lame ducks, I suppose. I was always really attracted to helping people from a very early age. So I gravitated towards the people that weren't necessarily particularly competent socially. They weren't great sports people, and yet I was very sporty. And I think probably the defining moment where I realised I was really interested more in other people than I was in myself was when I was captain of the hockey team. And I was asked to pick some people from the group, just our form group, to be on the team. And there was some really great sports people there. But I chose the two that nobody would ever choose. So I chose these two people. And 30 years later at the school reunion, they came up to me and I barely recognised them. We'd all changed so much. And they said, probably the most significant day in our whole school life was when you rescued us from being last and you put us first. And I thought, gosh, there's such a powerful story there, isn't there, about really looking at other people and identifying need. And that really set a fire inside me. And I thought, gosh, they've remembered that across 3 decades. That was really powerful. So I was in the middle of my West End acting career at the time, which wasn't particularly fulfilling in and of itself. But there was just something calling inside me to say, this is about you. The West End career is about you and attracting attention to you and competing against other people and looking at people with more and being envious of other people's career progress. You never have a moment. I certainly didn't take any time out to think about people with less. So that sensitivity, I think, started early on, seeing kids who were really brutalized by aggressive parents. Lots of kids turned to crime very early. Coventry's a big city with lots of its own economic and integration difficulties. So I was attracted to the grittiness of working with people in urban settings who had complex problems. And I was always a good listener. I think that really helped me. It certainly helped me in later life, actually, listening more than I speak. I think that's a great and very overlooked capacity, actually. So I grew up in this rather difficult environment. My dad was disabled, which was tricky. And any point of difference in the kind of very, very binary neighbourhood in which I grew up was very challenging indeed. And there were still those awful phrases about disabled people being bandied around. And I took it personally, and it stuck. Those arrows dug deep into my sensibility. So I had a dad who'd had a really bad spinal injury. And for most of my childhood, really, he was in a spica plaster, which is a solid plaster of Paris plaster that went down his legs. And so he walked very, very awkwardly. And he was very, very pilloried. So that was tough, so I found it difficult to make the right kind of friends at school. So I had two binary groups really of friends, people who were dangerous and exciting and always in trouble. And I was very easily led by them. And the others, the people that I picked for the hockey team, the people who were always last and I wanted to put them first. So there was this dreadful tension. And that doesn't lead to happy outcomes. I ended up getting into lots of trouble and being the one that was pushed, under the bus all the time by these rather more aggressive individuals. So bullying was a very, very significant part of my childhood.
Mm.
And it became very physical. I was probably the worst thing that ever happened to me. And this is quite a traumatic story to listen to. It's not a traumatic story for me to tell, so I'll happily tell it to you. But one of the girls at school who ended up being in the police force, actually, and you'll hear the irony of this when you hear the end of the story.
Right.
I was really a very talented musician. There was no money in our house for any formal music training, but my nan gave me a clarinet for my 7th birthday.
Right.
And my mum hated the noise of it, and my dad was always quite poorly. So I used to put myself into my dad's wardrobe and play it. It was a big wardrobe of suits. So I used to put myself in the wardrobe where the sound would be all dampened down. And then when I was 18, I'd spent a long time in that wardrobe. It came out as a really good ragtime clarinet player.
Wow.
And that was a very helpful asset. That kick-started my first career, I suppose. So I retreated into music. That was my therapy, really. And I was great at it. And it brought attention to me, favourable attention, rather than unfavourable attention. And this particular bully hated that. So she locked me in her garage and she smashed up my clarinet. Wow. And she got a pair of pliers and she snapped out one of my front teeth, so I couldn't play it. So that was it was a horrific event. So it's very, very, very
Wow.
traumatic. And you spend thousands of pounds in therapy, don't you, getting over things like that. So that was really tough.
Yeah.
But I eventually managed to do really well at school. And she wasn't bright enough to carry on and do A levels. So that for me was an amazing sanctuary. But I managed to get out of that school system. And the more young people I speak to in the service provision that I provide, I run a mental health charity for young people called Aspire.
Yeah.
And that's down here in the southwest. And a lot of them tell me about these brutal physical, mental experiences that they have. And they talk about their school days as being not the best days of their lives, but an absolute crucible of awfulness.
Yeah.
And the mental health services provision within schools is woefully inadequate, as we know, because of funding. And there's probably 1 or 2 mental health providers within the school for sometimes cohorts of 2,500 kids, which is deeply inadequate. CAMS, as you know, is really difficult for young people to assess. When they meet a CAMS practitioner, it's not the same practitioner they might meet several journeys down the line, and they've got to reiterate the story, and that's painful and traumatic, and it just re-triggers very, very negative spirals. So I'm very aware of how difficult that is. That was my lived experience. So I wanted to try and put some of my zero journey into a kind of heroic state, if you like. So really understand that journey for young people of physical and mental brutality, going home to a troubled setting where parents are arguing, where there isn't enough money, where there's disability, all of these factors, and I was pretty much a young carer. That's also a reality for a lot of our young people with mental health issues. They're a neglected entity. They're not having a childhood. They can't get out. It's a very difficult life to lead. So there was all that burning away in the background, and then there was this emerging musician, and I didn't really know what to do with it. So went on, did my A levels, was very inspired by some brilliant teaching, and I lost myself in books and music and art, and that really was a phenomenal therapy for me. Still look back on that probably as the most effective therapy. Just that lifelong love of learning, which I've never let go of. Then went on to Birmingham University to do English and theology. I had half a mind to maybe a vicar. I wanted to do something pastoral.
Okay.
Tangential and bizarre.
Yeah.
But then English really captured my heart. So I carried on at Birmingham, went to the Shakespeare Institute to do a master's degree in Shakespeare studies.
Okay.
So became fairly expert at verse speaking and all the minutiae that an actor would need to be able to go on the stage and speak that verse well. So then did an internship at the Royal Shakespeare Company, and then started a journey as an actor, trained for a year as a postgraduate actor. And then I left drama school on the Friday, and I'd written the music for the end of term showcase. So you showcase your work in front of all the casting directors and agents. So I'd written the music, and there was a man in the audience called Harvey Bruff, now really famous musician. He wrote the music for Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut, so he's really famous.
Okay.
Cinematic composer. He just said, you've got enormous talent. What are you going to do with it? And I just said, I don't know. I finished drama school today.
Yeah.
And he said, well, come and work with me. So we did, and we spent a lot of time sampling back in the days when that was really novel. We sampled stuff that was sold to bands like The Beloved, and we were sampling little snatches of the Eurythmics and Kate Bush, and those samples became very embedded in early kind of garage music. So that was my first kind of entry into that career. And then I auditioned for a play at the Young Vic and got that. So by the time I got home on the number 73 bus, there was a voicemail. Do you remember voicemail?
Yeah.
Voicemails
Yeah.
saying, oh, you've got the job and you start on Monday. So that was the beginning of it, really. And then I was really lucky. I got a really big break. I got a part in Sam Mendes' production of Cabaret at the Don Marway House, which launched his career really in terms of he filmed it, so it became a film. And Spielberg was in the audience and realised that he was in the hands of somebody really very eminent. So Sam Mendes went off to Hollywood and had the career that he did. So that was amazing. I spent a lot of time at a very high level in the West End. And then I had some emerging health issues. I'd always been very flexible, lots of double jointedness, which is great, for sports. I was a great sportswoman, and I'm very good for playing instruments. The more curly your thumbs are, and the easier it is for you to be very dexterous. But I didn't realise that being so hypermobile could be problematic, and suddenly joints are dislocating, fingers, jaw, shoulders particularly problematic. And I would go on stage at night. I played the baritone saxophone in the end. That was my instrument of choice.
Right.
So sort of 3 stone of instruments, like holding a baby or just 5-year-old.
Yeah, bigger than a baby. Yeah.
So I would literally get some gaffer tape and I'd put it here on my arm and then strap it up to stop my shoulders coming out of joint. And because the shows from the West End tore out, you're in the regions all the time. Every time a show finishes its 6-month run in the West End, you do number 1 circuit. So you go all around the UK, so everyone and anyone can see the show. They don't have to come to London. And then I came back to London and thought, I better get something done about this, because I'd dislocated my shoulders about 12 times a day, 13 times a day, and it would happen opening bags of crisps and putting coats on. I thought, there's probably something going on here.
Yeah.
So went right to the top end of the service. Really met an incredible guy who's still practicing. This is an incredibly inspirational story in itself. He's called Professor Rodney Graham, and I think he's in his mid-90s now, but he's still Professor of Hypermobility at University College London.
Wow.
And I was one of the first patients that he divined to have Ehlers-Danlos type 3, which is a complex soft tissue and collagen deficient disorder.
Okay.
So went through lots and lots of treatment to try and make that right, but I passed that point of no return, really, where that was going to be difficult. So in 2008, I had the first polyether ketone shoulder replacement, or as a resurfacing, actually. So had my shoulder taken out and a plastic thing put in. But there weren't enough clinical trials to make that a success. It was unlicensed and really unregulated. Wow. And that caused me to have very, very significant systemic breakdown. My body went into what's called an autophagic attack, where your cells and all of the soft tissue starts to eat itself. So I had a complete fasciitis here in the upper arm. So there was no skin, no muscle left. It was all eaten away. So eventually had 2 more shoulders and was terribly allergic to both of those. So I've ended up now with what's called a flail arm. This is a brace that's been made for me, but as you can see, I've just turned the arm around. There's no top of the arm at all. So there's no humerus, no elbow, no anything. So this is a kind of empty space.
Yeah.
So I went from being a successful actor musician. As a sideline, I was a session musician. So I played for Rod Stewart, Van Morrison, Nat King Cole, Dinah Kroll, and did all those big 80s outings, all the people from the 1980s doing career revival work in Europe. Central Europe loves 80s music. So we did massive stadiums in Cologne, 50,000 people watching us play. So, I went from that to being unable to dress myself, to live independently. So I handed the keys back on my flat in Wimbledon Village, and, having had a really well-paid, very high-level career, just my life collapsed, absolutely collapsed. So my mental health went with it. Yeah. And along the road there, I'd seen a lot of people in mental health decline. You can't be a musician on the road and not be exposed to drugs and drink and just self-destruction. People think it's a glamorous life. It's a very difficult life to lead. Yeah. Having no home, no base, no family to love and support you, you're just really at the whim of the lassitude of your mental well-being. And sometimes it's low down, sometimes it's high up, but very, very rarely on a level. So I realised I was living this sort of extreme reactive life to the things that had happened to me. So I thought, I'm going to have to get some help. So I struck out for a practitioner that might be able to help me to get my mind right, because work is incredibly important to me. Yeah. And I love to help people. So I thought, well, how can I still get the buzz that I got from being on stage? Because it is a buzz, you know, adrenaline is a very powerful drug. And when you don't get a round of applause every night after what you do, it's weird, you know, coming
Yeah.
back to reality and having to think about my own washing and ironing. You know, I'd had someone doing that for me for years
Yeah.
online,
Yeah.
you know, on the road.
Yeah.
Suddenly there was this sort of granular, boring, everyday grind. And I thought, God, you know, this is really depressing. So that probably more than anything was a real shock.
Mm.
I sound like a princess, don't I?
No, not at all.
It
Not at
was
all.
it was a real kind of mind shift.
It makes sense.
So I
Yeah.
ended up living, this is the worst thing that could ever happen to anybody. I ended up having had that life, living back at home with my parents because I needed help to be supported and I hadn't got any money. I was
Yeah.
absolutely broke. So that, you know, I think my zero to hero journey from there has been quite a profound one. I sought some really good mental health support. I went to meet a woman who was a neurolinguistic programming counselor because that really seemed to chime with my desire for it to be quite intensely intellectual as well.
Yep.
And she just said, look, you know, how you do something is how you do everything. So if you can understand how you do things, you can change that. If you ask yourself what and why, you'll always justify why you're doing something or what you're doing. But if you look at the process, the granular process of how you do something, then you can change that connection between your mind and your body. And I realized that I was living in my head as a depressed person, and I hadn't remembered that there was this body, although it wasn't the body that I was in control of or particularly like, to be honest. When you go through physical transformation and disability hits you midlife, it's very difficult. I think it's probably more difficult than living with it forever.
Oh.
So, you know, coming from a very able, dexterous life to being physically very disabled was really, really tough. So those processes, the looking at the how was really important for me. That really saved my life. So I looked more into NLP and into how I could use it and all of the actor training processes that I'd gone through to help people to put their lives back together after trauma.
Yep.
So I've got this sort of mantra in my business now, Leader Empowerment's all about post-traumatic growth. And I don't necessarily mean physical trauma, and I don't necessarily mean masses of mental trauma. You know, you don't have to have gone through sexual abuse or domestic violence or near suicidal experiences to experience mental ill health, as you well know.
Yeah.
You just need to have a very poor view of yourself. And you have to just believe that the world is against you. And all you need to do every day is to program that into your brain, and very, very quickly you'll be in a very dark and isolated place. So neurolinguistic programming is wonderfully enabling in that it enables you to interrogate everything you say.
Yep.
So we become what we say. So if I say everything's against me, then yeah, it is. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Whereas if I wake up every morning, and as I do this mantra with myself every morning, I say, I am rich beyond my wildest dreams. And honestly, I'm not, man.
No.
That's not financially true. But I'm rich in love.
Yeah.
I'm very loved. I'm rich in ability. Since my disability, my dad said to me, my dad's quite a profoundly interesting man, actually. Overcoming his own disability, I think, has given him quite a good language system for this. And he said, look, Charlotte, what are you going to do? You've got two choices. You can look at the dirt or you can look at the stars. What is there in your life that you haven't done, that you really feel you need to put in place before you die to feel that you've lived the life you love? And I said, well, you know, I've always wanted to fly.
Yeah.
I went out with a guy who was in quite a famous pop group many years ago on my tour as a female sax player. I was introduced to lots of gentlemen of the parish, and he was one of them. I'm not going to name him because that wouldn't be professional. But he flew a Learjet, and I thought, wow, you know, we went here, there, and everywhere in it, and it was very glamorous. And I thought to myself, I want to be a pilot. And my dad said, well, should we look into being a disabled pilot? And I said, oh, come on, Dad, you know, I've got one arm, can't use the other one. I can't use my right arm, I've lost my dominant arm. He said, no, come on, it might be possible. So I looked it up, and it was possible. So I applied for a flying scholarship for disabled people. And I went to the interview at Cranwell, RF Cranwell, in 2019. One of only a very small number of women, of course. Only 5% of pilots are actually female. And I think about 0.3% are actually disabled. So I thought the chance of me getting a scholarship was slim. But thanks to Lockheed Martin, they took me on, and they sponsored my flying scholarship. And I'm now on a pathway to teach other people, the disabled people, to fly. So I've learned to fly. And it's probably one of the most amazing things. If you're frightened of flying, folks, get up in a light aircraft. It's a very different experience to being on a commercial aircraft, where you can see your problems just shrinking away within 60 seconds of takeoff. You know, you're probably at 1,000 feet, and your problems just seem very, very infinitesimally small beneath you. So for me, that's been the most amazing thing. So my practice is all about getting people to move from that second officer, you know, the first officer, the person sitting in the right-hand seat,
Yeah.
to being a pilot in command. You can be pilot in command of your own life. And you can do that very much through trying to unite. And we try and separate them. We try and separate body and mind. And we don't want to go to the gym because it's punishment. But actually, it does make you feel a lot better to do the very thing that you're trying to struggle against. So trying to unite body and mind, and asking yourself how you do something. And if you can understand how you're doing it, and it's not giving you the outcome you need, you can look at that how, and you can try and find a different way of doing something. I did some work in the last couple of years with the Royal Marines Band, probably my most exciting area of work, really. And I prepare their corps of drums. These lads play the drums. They're phenomenally expert at what they do. They're very elite individuals. And they also play the valveless bugle. And they have to do the last post. And we all know the tune. Everyone knows how that tune goes. And it's a valveless instrument. That's incredibly difficult to play when you're full of physical tension. So I've been working with the troops at Libston and Portsmouth, the training school, and at HMS Raleigh over the last few years to dissipate physical tension so that they can do that job without worrying about the outcome. They can just look at the how they're doing things with physical tension, release the physical tension, and do it without, so that they can put all of their training into immaculate practice.
Right.
And I prepared them for the Queen's funeral, for the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral, and also for the coronation, just to see the impact of the work in a global setting like that has been absolutely amazing. So from my little housing estate in Coventry, this troubled child, from a very difficult background, who's come through, the glamour of the West End and from, international musical touring, to being completely shattered by physical trauma and to being given the wrong shoulder. And yet that's invented this new part of my life, which is the most fulfilling part, believe me. I'd rather be doing what I'm doing than standing on a stage performing in front of thousands of people. You don't get to know your audience in that context. You do a lovely thing for them. It takes them out of their rather tedious lives often. That's why people pay money to see it, isn't it? And you do something lovely for people for 3 hours and they thank you by giving you a clap. But the work that I do now, to really help people who are trapped, who don't have the courage to live the life they lead. I hope that my story of learning to fly one-handed as a woman is a very powerful one. So I've tried to unite everything I've ever done in the practice that I'm currently doing. So I'm just reaching out at the moment. What I'm looking for is just a chat. I'm not selling anything. I'm not actually even running a business at the moment. I just want to meet people who've been where I have, not necessarily physically or wherever, but just trapped, just stuck because of mental limitation, and trying to get them back into their bodies so that they know whenever anything hits them broadside, they've got the resilience and the consistency not to be reactive, but to be proactive.
Brilliant.
That's what I want. That's what I want to do with the rest of my life.
Amazing, incredible. Thank you. It's been what a fascinating and inspiring and interesting story, though, and that's why I love this. Is that I love sitting back and just listening and riding the journey with you, and sharing those sort of moments and experiences that you've been through. And what I love is what you're into now and where you are and what you're doing and going through that. It's interesting, isn't it? There's sort of like there's changes in direction in there. There's challenges. There's experiences that we get, and it's what you said at the end there is so important, I think, around moving from reaction. So what we tend to do is we only know things are wrong when they're wrong. We never see them coming, or we never see the transition to them. So I think that's so powerful what you're sort of positioning now and sharing with everybody that's listening. So an invitation there for anybody that is listening or does want to know, if you want to have a chat with Charlotte, I know you're gathering conversations, thoughts, feedback and everything else for a period of time now before you go for the big programs that you want to deliver in the future. But feel free to get in touch with you, right, Charlotte?
That'd be lovely.
And as always, I'll drop all the details into the episode so that people can find you, they can connect with you. We'll be sharing this obviously on social. So it really is just, let's connect, let's talk. Because I think, as I say, you've got a fascinating story and journey that you're on, and it continues, doesn't it? And it's that.
Oh, absolutely.
What does the future look like? And I think I can already see a little bit about where your future's heading, especially with the flying and the training leadership stuff that you do. So as we wrap into sort of the last part of this, I always sort of like to leave the guest with the opportunity to sort of say parting thoughts, mantras, quotes. You've already given a wonderful quote in there. We might even get a repeat of that quote, I'm guessing, because it sounds like a really phenomenal one. So sort of just putting it over to you just for the last few minutes, just anything else you want to share about where you see the world today, what you see for the future, what you want to share. So I just leave that as a very big open question for you.
Well, I work primarily with adults. Obviously, that is my business. But as a sideline, as I alluded to, I run a mental health charity for young. So the phrase I use with them, and I think it's absolutely foundational to our understanding of what we are capable of.
Yep.
And what we are capable, without filtering, of allowing the world to do to us, is this one. It's a Henry Ford quote. If you think you can and you think you can't, you're right. So it's all about where you situate your mind. If you think something is absolutely impossible, it will remain so. You've set that barrier for yourself. But if you think you can, you will find a strategy. You'll find that how. How do I make this happen? And in that's gold, I think.
Yeah.
I've used that myself a lot in recent times, post operations, post disability. I've used that a lot. I use that, throughout the age groups of people that I work with.
Yeah.
Because it's all about setting your mind frame. What do you want from this journey in life? I saw a really interesting thing online the other day. I try not to immerse myself too much in social media because it's a bottomless pit of stuff, isn't it? But this was really profound. It was a black and white photograph, and it was a series of gravestones just falling into the distance. And it just said, these are all of your unfulfilled ambitions. I thought, wow, we can say goodbye, can't we, through a lack of confidence and a lack of focus and a lack of self-belief. We can say goodbye to everything we might ever really dream of living. So what we do is we end up living a life we actually despise. And we'll look back on it. My mum's reviewing her life at the moment. She's 81, bless her.
Yeah.
And she's probably got a few weeks to live, if that, I would imagine. And she just said, I haven't lived what you would call a happy life. And that's heartbreaking.
Wow. Yeah. It's very profound, isn't
it? I wept profoundly when I heard that. I thought, imagine reviewing your life and thinking that that's the case. So if whoever's listening today, please don't let that be your epitaph, the one that you chisel for yourself on your gravestone. Just get the right mental health support around you. And it's different for everyone, isn't it? I've tried CBT, I've tried all kinds of pathways, but neuro-linguistic programming works for me because I'm a person that's busy in the body. And I need something that helps me to do things differently. So my mind and body need to work together and stuff. I can't just change my brain. My body's got to be following.
Yeah.
So if you've tried a pathway that hasn't worked for you, my dad said to me, mental health practice doesn't work for me. And I thought, well, you haven't tried enough avenues.
Yeah.
You keep trying until you find something that works for you. And it may not work for you forever. So keep trying different options. Talk to more knowledgeable others. And talk to people who've been on your pathway. So if you are struggling with mental health, and there's no shame in it now, thank goodness, these conversations are open and free. So, try steps to wellbeing as a start off. You'll be dumped, unfortunately, after about 6 weeks of that, won't you?
Right,
so you need to find something else that works for you. But, just talking, particularly men, if men are listening to this, please, my darlings, talk about your mental health because there's no shame in it. We're all in this very difficult journey of life together. So, just talking.
And I like, well, as sad as it is, but very profound, the thoughts that your mum shared, with that thing about the happiness and leading a happier life. And I think so many people find it a struggle to create the time and space to do that. And that's what we're seeing a lot more of now, especially is, too busy, too many things going on, not enough time for myself. I'm a massive advocate of prioritizing ourselves over everything else, so number one priority for me is me.
That's not a selfish thing either, is it, Matt?
Not at all. Not at all.
The
no.
first thing I do when I meet a client is I do a little like a pizza wheel, I call it, and I get them to just divide it up and say, these are the categories you can choose from, and you can sketch in as much as you like in these things. But how much time are you at work? And nearly always, but 80-90% of your life was consumed by work. Most people hate their job. That's what I hear all the time.
It's a sad reality. It's a sad reality.
Hate my boss. I'm stuck. I hear that word probably more than any other word. I'm stuck. I hate it. I'm miserable. I'm not going anywhere. And I can imagine that's painful. And then when I say, how much time are you spending with your partner? And it gets a tiny little wafer thin strip. And how much time are you spending with your children? Even smaller. They don't know who I am, especially if you're talking to people who have executive lives and like you are involved in global traveling. And then how much time are you spending with yourself or for yourself? Sometimes it's not there at all.
And it's harsh, isn't it? Because people, and the problem is though, we know it. People know it, but they don't change it.
I make people accountable.
Yeah, good.
There's always time. There's always time. With my
Yep.
disability, it takes me 2 hours to get ready because I like to put my makeup on. I like to
Yeah.
look like I used to look, so I don't want to bring out a different version of myself.
Yeah.
And trying to put your mascara on, Matt, believe me, with your left hand is not easy. It's
Well,
not a process.
I'm left-handed, so I'm doing all right.
Oh, yeah,
I
okay,
could
well, you'll
probably
be
do
fine.
it. So yeah, I'll be
But
all
it
right.
takes me an hour to put the makeup on, Matt, and it takes me about
Yeah.
half an hour to take it off the areas that I didn't want it in. So that's the work. So I have to plan back, but then
Yeah.
I'm trying to
Yeah.
learn French. My
Okay.
brother had a French girl, and I've got a French niece now, and she speaks very, very fluent French and very little English. So
Okay.
I'm trying to learn French so that I can continue a loving relationship with her. So that's
Yeah.
another hour in my morning. So
Yeah.
I get up at 4:30. I know that sounds ridiculous, but in order to fit in the me time
Love
that I
that.
need,
I love that.
that's what I do. I go out for
Quality.
a walk of an evening. I don't sit and watch box sets. You won't thank box sets in the last episode of your life when you're sitting in a nursing home when that's all you've got to be watching.
Yeah.
Because you won't remember those bird walks that I do at 5 a.m. where the birds are just waking up and you're part
Oh
of
my
that
God.
wonderful chorus of amazingness.
I'm on that.
What do you
That's
do?
well, yeah, I run in the morning and it is,
Oh,
it's
brilliant.
just there's something peaceful about running in the morning. Running in the evening, I find it quite challenging because it's too late and I'm too tired and the day's winding down. And yeah, running in the morning, oh, it's beautiful. I totally get it. Totally.
Well, I leave my phone behind when I do all of these
Okay.
things.
Yeah.
Catastrophes can occur. I don't care. I've just got to that confident state now of just saying
Yeah.
the world can wait.
You need
This
that. Yeah. Yep.
time, absolutely. So you need to hold yourself accountable. No
Well,
one else can do that for you as an individual. You have to do that for yourself. So self accountability is critical in all of these things.
yeah. And a lot of it, if people look at what they actually do in that time, is they're either resting sort of, but they're probably scrolling, they're probably doing all those, things that just consume your energy versus increase your energy. So it's
But it
important.
also it also kicks off what I call the inner assassin. You look at people
Yeah,
who
yeah,
are better looking than you. You look at people with better skin or a better figure
yeah,
or a better job
yeah,
or children who are less problematic. We can all find comparisons that
yeah,
make us feel absolutely awful about the
yeah,
way we're currently at. So the less you look at the phone, the more empowering it is, I think.
yeah. Very. Oh my God, I feel like we're just like we're continuing another journey now. We're talking about the future. Oh gosh, there's so many things we could talk about here, isn't there? Charlotte, we are right at the end. I apologize for like cutting this down now, but we, honestly, it's been incredible. I really enjoyed listening to your story. You're an amazing human, and I really want to sort of, wish you all the very best because I know there's a lot of things going on in your world at the moment, especially with your mum, and wishing you and your mum and your family all the love and everything else, and taking care of yourself is really important in all of that, as you are well aware. Keep doing what you do because you're obviously doing a good thing. But thank you. Really appreciate it. And I look forward to sort of following your journey, listening more to what's going on. And I will be encouraging people to reach out to you to have a chat. Hopefully a few people might reach in, fingers crossed. So yeah, all the very best for the future. Take care of yourself, and hopefully speak to you soon.
Thank you, you too. You're doing a great job. It's wonderful.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you for joining me.